Well, welcome to my presentation. I'm calling only from a blimp because, as it says, without an airship, none of this would have happened. So I'm Hunter Harris. I'm an Eastern Shore boy, many generations. I was never in the military. However, I have a commercial license, FAA commercial license for every category of aircraft that exists, including a letter of authorization for what they now call powered lift. It's the B-22. And I was one of the first two guys ever to get that letter of authorization back in the 80s. And that's a whole nother story. But anyway, I'm also a licensed aircraft mechanic and licensed aircraft mechanic inspector. So I can inspect the work done by others and sign it off. Not that I do that, but I have the license to do it. It's just been kind of fun. And I've had the opportunity to fly all these different aircraft, many places around the world, but mostly US. But of all this flying, which has all been enjoyable, at least 99%, my favorite is my flying airships around the country, which I spent almost 10 years full-time, many years part-time. And how many people have seen a blimp? This crowd, yeah, I expect all hands. If you've seen a blimp, yeah. Yeah. If I ask that question to a younger crowd, no hands go up because there aren't any anymore. There's only Goodyear out there, a few small ones. So to understand what an airship is, it helps to have seen one. And how many people have been on an airship near one, close up? See, without that, you have no idea how big they are. So I'm going to show you some images about that. So I got involved in airships. That's a long story, but I was commercially flying charter planes and do a lot of helicopter flying, not a lot, but some helicopter flying and seaplanes. And I was involved in a flight test program started here in Tulsa County, actually, Bosley, this heavy lift airship. Ended up in Tillamook, Oregon, because it had a gigantic blimp hangar. And that was an interesting 7 years on and off flight testing this heavy lift airship, which, depending upon who you talk to, was successful or not. We flew it 18.8 hours. I call it successful. It didn't make any sense. It was very complex, full of problems, but it was serial number one, so that's always the case. Anyway, then I got into helium purification and developed a mobile unit, which led me into the world of advertising blimps and some other things. And I was offered a position back in the mid-'80s to be a student blimp pilot. And I never thought about it before. And then when they mentioned the salary and the per diem, I said, certainly, sign me up. And it was unbelievable. And so, and it was an opportunity to learn to fly something that opportunity just doesn't exist since the Navy's gotten rid of them. So it turns out I was trained by retired Navy guys and retired Goodyear guys. And I was the first FAA commercial licensed airship pilot that was not Goodyear or Navy licensed by the FAA. It took quite some time to get the FAA to send a check airman. I was in Phoenix at the time to ride with me. Never been in a blimp, but he gave me a check ride. And he told me I had a good time. So he signed me off, and off I went into the big world of airships, which led me, and I've flown 13 different make and model airships. I did flight testing for airships that were of a new design, never flown before. Was a part of the, not the design so much, but the production, the assembly, and then of course first flight testing. Usually took about almost 2 years generally. A lot of flight test programs / profiles to accommodate the FAA's requirements to make sure it was safe. And during these flight tests, we discovered all sorts of things, all sorts of stuff. Anyway, we ironed it out, and when we were done, they gave us the stamp of approval, and those airships are now certified for production. And that was fun. I learned a lot, working with engineers and other test pilots. Then I got into the advertising world of airships, which is nothing but fun. cruising around the country nonstop. You're attending all the major sporting events, concerts. You're always at something important. Golfing, did all the senior stores for years. And more than once, sitting around a happy hour, one of the crew guys would go, this would be a great job if we didn't have to drag that damn blimp around. So we were offered a lot of wonderful opportunity, met people. I've met so many neat people, both famous and not so famous, but some hiding. But anyway, during that time, I have a list of stories here, and there's a lot of stories on another list, but these are ones that are funny. Again, could have only happened with an airship, so that's what I want to share. This is the first time I've really given a presentation only on the funny stories. So that's a little background about me. So let's see if we can operate this thing. So there's a blimp. This is the Fuji blimp. It's a Skyship 600. Notice it's on a mooring mast, which is mounted to a truck. That's our mobile truck. And it's 200 feet long. It's 6,000 cubic meters, about 230,000 cubic feet of helium. It's a lot of helium. The gondola is it's certified for 13 people. We generally carried anywhere from 8 to 10. Nice leather seats, full bathroom, running water. The panel for us flyers was latest, greatest color radar. We could fly IFR or whatever we wanted. But the 600 was, in all my airship flying, my favorite to fly. It could handle weather. It was it was a great airship. Oops. So you guys, anybody study their homework? Okay, real quick, because this has something to do with the stories. So inside that big bag of helium, there's two bladders called ballonets. Ballonets are filled with air. The idea is the hull of the airship, if you were to walk up to it, if you could, and push your finger on it, you go against the pressure. And that pressure is very, very low.
It's got there.
Uh-oh. Anyway.
Yeah.
Did I win some? Anyway, the pressure is very low. We generally run between 0.9 to 1.6 inches of water pressure. And to describe what that is, if you were to take a clear tube and bend it U-shape and put a yardstick against one of the sides of vertical, pour some water in there and blow in one end. When you lift that column up 1 inch, you're exerting 1 inch of water pressure. There are 27 inches of water pressure in 1 psi. So it's a very, very low pressure. But it's a very critical pressure because if the airship hull, it's not rigid, doesn't have a framework in there, it's just a big bag of gas. If it becomes slack because of low pressure or tight because of high pressure, things happen that you don't want to happen. High pressure means pop, maybe, and if it propagates, it could, you're on the ground. Low pressure, it starts to sag. So control cables don't work right. So you have to be constantly aware of the pressure. You're adjusting it. You adjust it by inflating or deflating these ballonets. So when you climb the thinner air, and even 1,000 feet makes a big difference, the pressure's less than it is here on the surface. So that allows the helium to expand. When it expands, it pushes pressure on the internal part of the bag, which you've got to be very cautious about. So in order to keep it within a range, we allow air to escape from the ballonets. And our maximum altitude is based on when we run out of air in the ballonets to maintain that pressure constant and there's nowhere for the helium to go, we either have to valve helium, which is a big expensive move, you don't want to do that, or that's your what we call pressure height. It's as high as you're going to go. So, and then when we descend back down into thinner air or thicker air, the helium is contracted and you have to put air in the ballonets to compensate for the opposite. So there's a lot of science between all that. By the way, you can see the, we don't have a pointer, but you see those cables, vertical lines. The gondola is actually hanging from the top of the envelope. Those are called catenary cables attached to catenary curtains. So when we do a pitch up, the loads carrying the weight are concentrated on the forward ones and vice versa. So a lot of things going on in a blimp. And that's why I enjoy it so much compared to any other aircraft. It's never, after thousands of hours of flying them, never have I had two flights that were the same. It's always different. There's always different equations. It's never ending. It's a real fun challenge. So there's some more of your homework, and it shows the helium valve right at the equator. In case we have to release, we pull a cable and helium escapes. It also is against a spring. So the helium inside reaches a certain point, it's going to pop open by itself just to save the bag. So these are all important things for the stories coming up. All right, enough of the lectures, tests later. Here's, this was my most enjoyable cross-country tour. I snuck this blimp from Elizabeth City, North Carolina, across the U.S. in March of, what was that, 94, to Los Angeles. I snuck it across the country at 35 miles an hour with a crew of 20-some guys. And we arrived on cue, really on cue, in front of a big party in the front yard of the Rose Bowl put on by Columbia Records to announce the upcoming world tour of the Division Bell tour for Pink Floyd. And so that's a pretty wild little blimp. Imagine, many stops along the way, but the amount of excitement that it generated along the way. And when we landed there in this tight area in front of the Rose Bowl, go on Google Earth sometime, take a look at that yard. It's not real. Columbia Records had set up these tables and all this food, all these hors d'oeuvres, but they didn't have any drink. And so the media was there, but everybody wanted something to drink. And so when we landed, we had 9, maybe 10 waiters and waitresses deep blimp with champagne. Served the media. And then we hung around for a while, and I said, anybody want to go to the media? Anybody want to take a look around LA, Hollywood? I loaded up a bunch of people and off we went back to Bracken Airport. That was a really fun time. So there, again, the size of the airships, that's the gondola of the 600. You can see how large those windshields are to the front there, big vectored fans, powered up by twin turbocharged Porsche 930 engines, 255 apiece, 255 horsepower apiece. Meaning vectored fans is we can bring them up vertically, 90, and then 0, and then down vertically, so we can vector our thrust. And very maneuverable airship. And you can see above the gondola, you can see some little dots. That's part of the night sign system, a very abbreviated one for this ship. It just said Pink Floyd. It didn't do anything fancy.
So how are the graphics done on these?
Paint.
It's painted.
FAA approved paint. I'm serious. So this contract came up rather quickly. This used to be the MetLife ship. It was in a hangar down in North Carolina. The contract came up and said, Hunter, you got to run this thing to California by this certain date. And they're still painting. I go, and there's a lot of paint and a lot of colors. And again, everything's FAA approved. It's all very tight. Well, we couldn't find these colors, a lot of them. And it was getting tight. And I said, there's a Sherwin-Williams store downtown. Go get the colors. And that's what's on there.
I'm surprised they didn't use a decal of some sort.
Well, they do now.
Oh.
Yeah, this is before that technology. So the artist that laid it out, Bert, really good guy, drank many beer together. So, and this is one of Bert's things here. That's the nose cone of the Budweiser blimp up on the mast. That's how it attaches to the mast. To give you an idea, again, how big it is, but he did that on his own because the opportunity was there to make a Bobcat. So there's the early crew I had back in '87. I was telling these folks earlier, it's a sad picture because most of those guys are gone. But my brown water dog was part of this crew for years. And he was so impatient because it was hot. This is San Diego, it was 100 degrees. And he went and sat in the shade of the blimp by the time the photographer got this picture, which was disappointing. This is the later SeaWorld blimp with a much larger night sign arrangement with 4 different colors. My crew holding the ship. They're putting fuel up behind the vector there. They're pumping fuel up into the back. And that's me in full uniform, Stetson hat.
Do they stay inflated all the time?
Yes.
They never deflate.
Never.
Can you repeat the questions, please?
Oh, and the answer is yes, unless there's no contract, there's no fee or crash. So the helium's very expensive. The airship structures all require it to be inflated and kept at pressure all the time. And so we went around the country, all over the country, everything but the higher elevations of the mountains. We mostly operated out of general aviation airports, but we've operated out of big airports too, Ontario, a lot of big fields around the country. And where there's enough open area to operate the ship. They're 200 feet long. We need a minimum of a 500-foot swing circle to make it safe. Plus, we got the vertical consideration of airplanes coming in and out. And so anyway, at the end of the tour, or at the end of the visit, as captain, I go up to the FBO just to check out, make sure the bill's paid for fuel and such. And usually the girls would say, well, we're not sure how to charge you for being here. And when you do with airplanes, even helicopters, they charge you by the gross weight of the airplane. So I'd say, well, we'll just use that same formula if you want. And I'd say, okay. I said, we were late, you owe me money. Because here it is on the mast and fading. So again, this will give you an idea of how big they are. And that internal pressure, see the guys up on top? They're walking around. It's just like on a mattress, sort of like.
Is there a hole in the top so they can get in and out? Or
Oh, no,
they slide off?
they climb up the ladder, they climb up the mooring mast, and then there's a handhold, and you just shimmy on up right off the nose.
Jeez.
And then there's a main line that goes nose to stern up there, which is attached along the way. And we use that line when we have to rappel down on the side and do inspections, which I guess it's okay to talk about it now because I'm not doing it anymore. But we had to do that often because we were shot more times than you can ever imagine. But we never talked about it because the media would grab it.
And everybody would do it.
Yeah, and everybody would do it. But that should be a whole nother lecture on different things. Anyway, so that's how big it is. Here they are up, they were replacing a light bulb up on the top thin there on the stove. And see the American flag, somewhere I have one of those flags. They're tremendous. All right. So here they are working on the blimp, and now we'll get into, so I did a lot of training pilots to fly. In this case, it was Shamu. We did a lot of golf tournaments. Golf tournaments require real careful blimp flying because if you're not careful when you adjust the power, it changes the conception on the ground. In other words, the sound of a blimp over a golf tournament will mentally disappear. You just don't pay attention to it. And because we drift along, we move out of sight, nothing happens, audibly very quickly unless you change the power. And that grabs their attention. Those golfers have blamed more missed putts on the damn blimp because somebody decided they wanted to fight a thermal or do something stupid and they changed the power, which wasn't going to help
So
anyway.
they blamed Shamu? Jeez.
That lot, Snoopy got it a lot too. But anyway, so in my training of upcoming airship pilots, I would teach them how to just fly the blimp. Leave the power alone. Just fly the sucker. Anticipate the lift or the descent and fly it. And here's that shadow that's going down the interstate. That's how big we are. And that truck went whizzing on by too, by the way, because we're only doing about 35. So that's the size of the shadow that we're dealing with. So one of my favorite places to train while on these moves, down in Florida, this is Disney World.
America.
Again?
Mr. Sonnenberg, can you please stay muted?
Oh, is he making noise?
I've muted him like 12 times. I'm sorry.
That's all right. So, they have these little communities outside of Disney World, which I've watched being developed over the years of flying around that country. And, they have this little, fake little beach on this fake little pond full of alligators. But anyway, people would come down from Michigan, spend all this money for a week stay in those things and then lay out on the beach usually. But the beach is exactly 200 feet long, and that's where you can really contrast the shadow. So I had the student in the left seat. I said, "Okay, you see that beach? Yeah, I can put the shadow on there and keep it there. Just keep it there." Just working like mad, watching that shadow. They're turning right, they're turning left, and the ship's moving very slowly. Don't touch the power. And they're just working. It's really tough to do. It's almost impossible if there's wind, but I love making them do it. And what I was doing was to see how long it took those people to get up and leave. Then I'd move off to another beach and terrify them. So there's the front cockpit. That's myself on the left, my really good friend Mike Fitzpatrick on the right. We had so many years of fun flying. He's no longer with us. So to give you an idea, we have an overhead panel full of instruments and gauges and buttons and whistles and lights and switches. That's what pilots like. And then a whole bunch down below, and then the steering yokes. But the best part is the windscreen. The windshields are the world's largest windscreen on any certified aircraft. Your view is spectacular. And I'm so lucky to have seen the country back and forth and up and down both coasts of the Mississippi and many places in between for many years, and it's all recorded up here. It's just an incredible experience. There's that windshield again. So with that windshield in mind, and by the way, you can see the window that's removable or folds down on the side there. That was my office for many, many years. So we did in SeaWorld, Shamu, Augie Bush would send special VIP guests out to the Blimp to go fly. Every once in a while, we had these VIP days. Very important to Anheuser-Busch, especially Augie. Everything was immaculate, which for me wasn't easy to do. But so one day, here comes the big fancy bus, pulls up, and I'm in the airship. We're on the mast. I got the engines running. We're ready to go. I got a necktie on, and these people walk out and they're being escorted by the representative to the airship, and our crew is carefully loading them. And she's always looking at me, the representative, like, what's he going to screw up now? And because I always seem to start trouble. So once they're on board, we shut the door and take the ladder away and do our check and come off the mast and take off. And once we're off the mast and climbing out, I usually send the co-pilot back, welcome everybody, give a briefing on the windows, how they operate. We don't wear seatbelts or anything. Any questions? If anybody really wants, they can come up and sit next to the captain. So, and that often happens. So this total stranger comes up, squeezes through and sits down. And I showed him where the headset was, and he put it on, and he's looking around. He goes, "Wow, what a view." I said, "Yeah, it's something." He goes, "This would be a great place to shoot geese from." I said, "Say again?" I said, "You're a goose hunter?" He goes, "Yeah." And he's just loving it. I said, "No kidding." I said, "Where do you goose hunt?" "I'm an Eastern Shore boy. I grew up goose hunting. I haven't shot since they had a steel shot." But he says, "Oh, up in Maryland." I said, really, whereabouts? He goes, on the Eastern Shore. I said, no kidding. Whereabouts on the Eastern Shore? And he started to look at me. And he says, near a little town called Chestertown. Of course, that's where I was born. I said, really? I said, whose farm? And he goes, he's looking at me, he says, Floyd Price. I said, well, Floyd's got 2 farms. What's he did? He's like, oh, how do you know that? I said, well, Floyd's an old friend. And so he was shocked. And we had a great flight, great talk about hunting and the advantage of sitting there shooting geese. But, and then before he went to the back, he wouldn't get out of the seat. It's time to go back and go to land, take the next group. And he was really appreciative, and he gave me his card, which I just put in my pocket. I didn't have time to look at it. And he said, Hunter, I look forward to seeing you up in Chestertown, and we'll go kill some birds together, and this and that. And I said, good. So he goes in the back, co-pilot comes in, oh my gosh, this is, I can't remember the name, but he was the president of Piggly Wiggly Food Chain. I saw a lot of blood on it. And so I put it back in my pocket. And as he exited the airship, once we were back on the mast, he reached up. He says, Hunter, that was so, I can't wait to see you in Chestertown. And this representative who's waiting for a complaint, is noticing all this friendship, and I had to kind of be there. But anyway, at least the guy had the right idea.
So that's the Marine fender is a nice touch, I think.
You notice that. Yeah. That's called a chin bump, chin bumper, because of the configuration. This gondola on the 600 is about another 4 feet longer than the one behind it, which is Shamu. It's a shorter version, and non-turboed engines. So the pitch angle on the main gear, it doesn't take as much on the 600 for that chin to bump on the ground. And it's 14 degrees. If the wheel's on the ground and it pitches up 14 degrees, which isn't much, the tail touches. And if the tail touches while you're flying, landing, or taking off, that costs the captain a case of beer for the crew. So it's an incentive to be cautious about that.
Is there only one manufacturer of all these?
Say again?
Only one manufacturer manufactures all these?
These are designed by a British company, and they're called the Skyship series. It's been owned by many different people. And so Slingsby, a British composite company that builds airplanes, they built the gondolas, the vectors, and all the composite components. The envelope was built by Azor in France, that builds Zodiacs, or used to be built by Azor. And the avionics are all American King avionics, so the engines are German, built by Porsche. And so it's a very international airship. It's all, this airship, as international as it is, used our normal system of measure. The German blimp I flew before this was all metric, which is another situation. So here we are with some stories. I'm supposed to talk to what, on the hour?
You have till 2:30.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So here we are. I just mentioned the German blimp. This is the first commercial one I flew. It came from Germany in a box, and they assembled it at Lakehurst in '86. I joined the crew in '86, and it retained the German registration, which is D for Deutschland, Delta Lima, Delta Fox Mike. So we flew this airship from Lakehurst to Florida to California, Chicago, back to New York, back to Lakehurst when the contract ended, and it turned into the first generation SeaWorld blimp after that. It lasted about half the contract and was destroyed on the mast in a thunderstorm just after I resigned from the company because our leadership, Lou Pearlman, if you ever heard of him, was unacceptable in my book, wasn't honest. Backstreet Boys, remember that name? That's Lou. Anyway, but this ship was a little bit shorter and it had a different fineness ratio, the diameter to the length ratio. It's far more slimmer, and, but therefore it does, at the same length, it doesn't hold as much helium, so it didn't have the amount of lift. Plus, the Germans sold this to Louis for a lot of money because it was no good. It was all worn out. And that fabric was rotten. So we had to deal with that. The ballonets with the air, you pushed air into the ballonet, but they were so rotten where the fold was that you're pushing air into the helium. So we had to constantly go in there in the ballonet on the mast. Somebody had to go in there with a miner's hat and put paraffin wax on all the folds. Filthy, dirty work. And there were some other issues too. But it had a night sign, pretty good size. And that was my training ship. It had a big elevator wheel, big wood wheel. And I still have calluses on my left hand. You push and pull with your right, and this is your brake caliper. And you could tell the blimp pilot because the side of his pants were all worn out, also a brake. So this is what I really learned in, and I learned a lot. So here's some stories about flying this old German ship. All right, so I was a student blimp pilot. I'm flying across the United States. Many, many hours, low and slow. I'm a farm boy, so I'm fascinated with farming techniques across the country. The equipment, all the details. It's right there in front of you. It's like, wow, look how long those rows are, just the irrigation. And then the wildlife would pop up. You guys wouldn't believe how a turkey can fly through the trees. You just can't believe it unless you look down and watch it. You're like, wow, he's pretty good. And so meantime, the guys I'm working with, you guys, they're just bored to death. They're doing crossword puzzles and stuff. So, we go across like West Texas and areas where there's gigantic farms and lots of cows. And I got curious because some cows would look up at Blimp and just look back down and continue what they were doing. Some cows would stampede and haul. I'd be like, well, what's different between that cow and that cow? And finally, by the time I got to California, I realized it was the cows that were stampeding. They're looking at this, could read. So anyway, we're crossing along, and I'm a student pilot. I'm the low man on the pole, and everybody's picking on me. So we landed this. I can't remember exactly where it was. West Texas, Arizona, someplace out way out there. Higher plateau, desert, long day, and little town, but they had a hotel with a good happy hour, and they've been proven by the other airship guys. So that was our goal every day, is to get to Point B, get down to happy hour, And this is on cross countries at least. So we're wrapping up the airship. It's on the mast. We're all done. Things are ready for the next day. Let's head for the hotel. And just then this school bus shows up coming up this dirt road. And the chief pilot looks at me, he says, Hunter, forgot to tell you, you're in charge of PR. So take care of these people. You can come back with Kent, who we had put up into the ballonet to do that waxing. I told you about the waxing necessary. So Kent had already been put up there, which is a matter of opening a man pass-through on the bottom. You untie it, and a chute comes down, and he steps into it, and then they tie it off, and he unties another, and it transfers up. So you minimize pressure change. And so he was up there doing the work. The van had been moved away because you do it from the roof of the van. School bus is parked, and here come these kids, and I'm like, all right. So it's always a good idea also, if somebody's in the ballonet, to have somebody there and just have a conversation. Because if there's helium in there, it'll kill you. And that has happened. And so if you got some sort of leak where you're getting helium, and they don't have a tank with them, but if you can see their feet. If they fall down, you got to get up there and get them out. And so anyway, I was on that duty also. But here comes the school bus, here come these kids, and he's busy, and now I'm trying to figure out what's PR mean. And if you haven't been near a blimp, you can't believe the size that you walk up to it. It's big. It's above you. And So I got them in a position where we bring all our guests, which is just between the gondola and the mooring mast for the airships fairly close to the ground. That way, when it swings, nobody gets knocked over like bowling pins. And so they came up, they were very organized, well-behaved little cowboys, had hats on, pointy boots. Their teachers, one of them wasn't bad looking, and they came up and I introduced myself and the blimp and had a few basic questions answered, I did. And then I just kind of happened to notice, I said, Kent's like right there, it's not much higher than the ceiling. I could see his feet, he's up there working. They had no idea, so I said, some other kid raised his hand, something like, how long is it? How big is it? I said, well, I don't remember. I said, why don't you ask Mr. Blimp, Mr. McBlimp? And the kid goes, I said, really? Yeah, ask the blimp. Kent called on. And the kid timidly says, how large are you? And Kent says, I'm 192 feet long. So, Joe Merrill made these sketches for me because it's hard to describe how this happened. So there's the ballet, here comes the school bus, there's the kids walking out with me guiding them, and there's the first answer, and the kids were falling over. You couldn't believe it. You couldn't have done it if you planned it. It didn't work. So next thing you know, all these hands go up. So we got another 2 or 3 questions to Mr. Blimp before Kent he was laughing so hard. And so I said, oh, there's somebody up there. Anyway, that was a really good time. And it worked out well because I was the low guy in totem pole trying to break into a really tight-knit crew of 20-some guys. And it's a tight-knit crew. And you're a target whether you like it or not. And when we finally got to the end of happy hour, Kent couldn't help but share the story. Yes.
I just wondered, did somebody have to stay there for
Yes,
security?
that's a good question
It
too.
would be too
There's
tempting.
always somebody with the blimp. Always, 24/7. If we're not flying it, there's a crew with the airship. Storms, nice days, doesn't make any difference. The purpose is you got to maintain that pressure differential perfectly. And as the sun comes up in the morning, the helium expands. So you got to make sure that the air comes out of the ballonets. When it expands, it provides more lift, starts floating. You got to throw some ballast on. And same the opposite in the evening when it cools off. Or if you get a rain shower, all that water makes it heavy. So you got to pull bags off. Hopefully you have some left to pull off. And so it's a 24/7 operation.
You have another question?
Yes.
Does the truck with the mooring mast travel with you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We have that truck, a tractor trailer, a big MCI bus, which is like a Greyhound style bus. The back half is an office, the front half is one side is seats, and the other side is nothing but hang-up bags and stuff underneath. And 2 dually pickups, 4-door, with one with an expedition mast, 3-piece, in case we got to go off-road. And we have a hidden fuel tank in the back because we have to stay together. We can't not have our fuel with the crew. So, a lot of tunnels and so forth are restricted. We don't have time for that. So nobody knows it's in there. And there's, 400 or 500 gallons of gas in that truck. But, we've never had an issue. So a lot of vehicles, plus captains are allowed to take their private vehicles. And so I have a crew member driving my car and my brown dog, he wasn't flying with me.
Hey, any cases of people taking pot shots at these things sneaking by?
Oh, yeah. Happen all the time. Cities, country, yeah.
Serious.
Serious.
How low were you?
We never flew higher than 1,200 feet.
Oh,
So it's as sporting as shooting at a school bus is what I describe it. So a lot of sick people out there.
do you report it? Do you report it so please?
You can't, you can't say a word about it. Because if the word gets out, then it happens. An example of that is, I was in Lantana, which is south of Palm Beach. And we were scheduled to do the morning traffic report live from Shenmue. And we had the talking head at the blimp, preparing the blimp to fly, and he was going live every so often from the van with his temporary report until we got out, on the airship and airborne. And we did this stuff all over the country, all the time. It was not unusual. And so the crew is scurrying around, getting things ready to go and fuel up, and I got the flight plan figured out. And then he went live, and we could hear him. He was right there, and he goes, "Yeah, we're going to be flying in about 15 minutes. Captain Hunter says we're going to be going here and there, and so forth, and which we had planned to do." And he says, "Come on out on your front porch and get your granddaddy shotgun." She said that live on the radio. Then the whole crew stopped. And I go, "What did you just say?" And he thought it was funny. I said, "You're out of here. Get his stuff out right now. Top it off. We're off the ground as quick as we can." I said, "Call your boss at your office right now. I want to talk to him." And I said, "I want you to save that recording, listen to it a few times, and I'll talk to you when I get back to Kissimmee. Any challenges are your responsibility."
So are they self-sealing gas bags or? Are they
What did they
self-sealing gas
take?
bags?
You can't self-seal that thing. So anyway, I took off, went offshore about 4 miles and went north up to Fort Pierce, and then cut in on back to Kissimmee. And no problems. But then I got worried about, okay, SeaWorld's going to get pissed because the way I treated them. I don't care about that. And they weren't. They were fine. Yes.
Hunter, when you do have a hole in the lid, just glue and fabric when you're putting this out there?
It depends on the hole. So we call them innies. So if you get an innie, you probably got an outie. Now, if you get an innie that goes through the ballonet,
That's a problem.
and then out again, that's the worst you can have. Because you got helium leaking out and you got air leaking into the helium. So you got to get on it. And so every morning at sunup, as soon as you get some light, the crew gets in the gondola and there's a astrodome. And you can look around, it's black. And you can look around. If you see a star, you got an innie. Well, if it's up above the equator, it's an outie. So you look somewhere for the innie. And then depending on where it's located, you either repel off that line, but they repair it very quickly. But it takes forever for the pressure to change with itty bitty little hole.
How do you know you've been shot?
Well, you first notice it that we check purification, not purification, but purity. So we take samples and we can tell what purity of the helium is. And it's oxygen and nitrogen that bring the purity down, which also brings the ability to lift down. So a cubic meter of helium can lift 1 kilo at 99.9% pure. But it's not a linear number. If it goes down to 98%, it's a whole lot less. Temperature has a little bit to do with it, humidity a little bit to do with it, but not much. So we monitor purity all the time. And if there's a trend, it might be the gauge, it might be the operator. We see a trend, we got to find that innie. It's in there someplace. We're up in New York with the German blimp, and that trend was showing, you guys got a problem. And we're saying, where is it? Where is it? We're looking around, we're doing all these checks, got a guy jumping off the side. We can't find anything. And then one morning, one of the crew guys was looking through the astrodome, which is at the bottom of the blimp. And he focused on right on the other side of the plastic. There was a 12-gauge slug. And made it in. Made a big hole too. But we found it, and we had confirmed. They found it and patched it. We purified. Anyway, a lot of those stories. Crazy people shooting. One more shot story. So we're cruising out in L.A. MetLife Big One. Beautiful night. And we're doing night sign, called exposure flights. So we're flying the MetLife required verbiage on the side. That's the American flag comes up. And when that happens, these 7,400 lights, if it's a display, usually the flag is a big one. and it requires many of the lights to illuminate. You can feel the generators on the engines, pull the engines down. So you can't keep them in sync because they're these loads from the generators. And until we finally got laptops, we didn't know what was showing because nobody was talking to us about it. Now we can see it on the laptop and you can hear the end. It was really fun. So I was back I told the operator, the night sign operator, I said, go have a seat. And just follow Interstate 10, take a left on 15 and keep it 1,500 feet. And I went back and just enjoyed watching and hearing and seeing. And then I heard a slap and I go, what was that? It's nighttime. And the guys up front both turn and they look back at me like this. They turn all the cabin lights on. I walked up to the panel. We're looking at instrument problems. Like, do we have a backfire? What was that noise? And we're checking, we're looking around, nothing. Everything's fine. So, all right. So we continued our flight, came back, landed late, and went back to the hotel. Next morning, sun up, we got an emergency call from the guy on watch. We got some innies, not one, but a bunch. And somebody had opened up on us. And that slap was a steel-jacketed hollow point that came through the floor about from me to that window and lodged in the composite roof. And that's why I heard it. So you just never know. So enough of the shooting stuff. What are we looking at? Okay. You know what I forgot to do? I got this map here. I forgot to put, I'm going to put this here. No, I'm not putting that here. That's where that's where the school kids were. And here's Florida. This is where the Piggly Wiggly guy was flying with me. And other stories did I tell you?
The Super Bowl story.
California, Pasadena. I was there. And that, by the way, was from here all the way to there in 9 days. And what it's a world record setting.
Average speed when you're transversing.
Say again?
Speed, your average speed.
Ground speed, the average ground speed going across country is, of course, based on the winds aloft. We don't fly high, so we don't get the precise winds aloft forecast that airplanes do because they don't measure down low. I mean, we get measurements from airfields and observations, but unless it's a known, real predictable pressure system, counterclockwise around low, clockwise around high, we deal with whatever's there. So we can sometimes take advantage of a tailwind and skedaddle, do 400 miles in a day, or depending on how important it is that we get to point B, we could only make 150 miles in one day. It's always different, and those forecast low-level winds are never guaranteed. Things change quickly. But on the average, zero wind, we indicate about 35.
Nice.
Doesn't make any difference when you're going 35. Really doesn't make any difference.
What about this jet stream that they just had? If you'd been flying a blimp in that, would you have gone really fast?
I set some records in the Snoopy blimp. The only time anybody could remember going through the Banning Pass in between Riverside and Palm Springs, there's a pass called the Banning Pass. It's where all the windmills are and stuff. And it can get really windy in there. So we usually plan on doing the pass at 4 a.m. That's usually when things are most settled. And so Roy Bellotti, who was vice president of the company, was with me. Just him and I came from Blythe on the Colorado River heading to Palm Springs. Ultimate goal was to get to San Diego. Within a couple of days, we had an event there. And So we came in and got in the valley there by Palm Springs, and it was howling in the pass, just this forecast, blowing into the valley. And so I was holding for my crew, which are still going down Interstate 10. And when you hold the blimp, you put it where they want you and you just stop. You know, so most airplanes have to go around in circles. So a blimp, you just stop, makes it easy. And I'm holding over the VOR, and they're operating at Palm Springs International as they normally do. I'm out of the way, and I could see the pass, and you could see the windmills. Off, they had vertical ones, all kinds. And then on the frequency, this guy comes up, a little scratchy on the radio, and gave a position report, which I didn't recognize. And he asked the tower a question: "Is that a blimp that's on the frequency?" And tower said, "Yeah, it's the MetLife blimp holding at the VOR." Is he coming through the pass? He said, "No, they're going to be landing at Thermal Airport, which is very close by, 177 feet below sea level too." But anyway, he goes, "Roger that," and he was scratchy. And so Roy and I are looking at each other. Who's that? And the guy came back to tower. He said, "Look, I'm eastbound on the south side of the pass doing power line patrol down low." He said, "It is blowing in the pass. It's 60 plus, but no gusts." He said, "Tell the blimp it's smooth as silk, but blowing in his favor." I said, we got thinking, and he came into our valley, turned around, went back on the north side as planned. And he checked in again just before he left because he was skedaddling now. He says, "Tower, let that blimp know that it's smooth on the north side. Smooth as silk." He said, "Come on in, the water's great." And he disappeared. And we're going, now that's a professional. This is an interesting situation. We got this $9 million blimp. We got this gold. We got this win. And they got a better happy hour on that end. And so the crew's coming down over the plateau, heading into the valley, soon to leave the interstate for thermal, get set up. And I called them on the radio. We had a lot of sunlight left. It was early, midday. And I said, "Hey guys, stay on Interstate 10 and go to the dinosaurs." I don't know if you've ever been through there, but there's a restaurant up the pass with these big dinosaurs. And they often stop in there for lunch. And they go, "Say again?" I said, "I want you guys to pull off at the dinosaurs and give me a weather report." So they knew what I was up to. And they knew it was blowing. So they got up there after it took them another almost hour to get there. And the crew chief came up on the frequency and says, "Huh?" He said, "It's blowing like crazy. Are you crazy?" And I said, "Look at the palm trees. Are they moving?" He goes, "Yeah, they're moving. They're laying on their side." I said, "No, are they moving? Are they going up and down?" "No, they're just laying over." I said, "Look around, both sides of the valleys. They're just laying over." I said, "Good." I said, "Stand by." I said, "We'll be coming through." And my vice president of the company, retired Goodyear, U.S. Navy, very experienced. He said, "Hunter, you're the captain." I said, "Would you do it, Roy?" He goes, "You're the captain." I said, "All right." I told the crew, I said, "Have the van, which is our fastest vehicle, ready to join the interstate when we get a beam. I want to get a measurement." And of course, none of them would go in for months. They were all out there watching. We got in there, and there's a point of no return. You get into this vortice, it's not a vortice, it's just you can just watch the ground start really moving. And we went past those dinosaurs so fast. And we have a Loran and a KNS-80 VOR DME, distance measuring equipment, gives you ground speed. Two different devices. Both of them had 3 digits on the display momentarily, maybe 3-4 minutes. But I was so excited. But I expected a rough ride, and it wasn't. It was smooth as silk. So I wish I'd come across this power line guy that give them a report. So we went blasting through, the crew got back in the vehicles and they joined the interstate. And they're all on the radio talking to each other. Wow, that was a world's record, and it was. But we never recorded it. There wasn't any way to do it back then. So we blasted on to, we had so much time, there's no use of stopping in LA because we can make it all the way to San Diego. So I go down the coast. I don't like taking the Paris Valley because it's between hills. And the wind was pretty strong, so it makes it bumpy. So I said, I'm going to go to, I'm going out to the coast. When you guys turn south on 15, give me a heads up. And I found the frequency for air traffic control center frequency. So if you have an issue, or if I have an issue, we'll do a relay with an airliner, which we've done several times. And so I got out to, not Long Beach, but south of there, Santa Ana.
Huntington,
Say again?
Huntington.
No, south of that even, where the big blimp hangars, we lost one recently. Near Tustin.
Yeah, there's the Tustin.
Yeah.
Or,
Santa Ana,
Yeah.
that area.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a harbor there that's very famous, where John Wayne kept his PT boat. Anyway, I went out there and hung out while my crew made it, because now I'm facing north into the wind, coming down the coast. Because that Santa Ana wind coming off the desert turns into a southerly wind down the coast. And so we're out there, I'm holding position with a fair amount of power, not going anywhere. No, I don't want to go that direction, so no big deal. And so we're waiting, we're talking, we're looking, PT boat's gone. And so anyway, the crew finally checked in, we're southbound on 15. I said, okay, anything comes up, give me a call, 2255 or whatever the frequency was. Okay, have a good trip, because they're on the other side of the mountains now. So I just reduced the power back to about an idle. Next thing you know, we're going backwards at 22 knots at idle power. I said, this is, we got plenty of time. This is interesting. We actually went from LA, Newport Beach, yeah,
That's what I was thinking.
all the way past the Marine base, the whole coast, all the way to Mission Bay, backwards at 22 knots. Because we could. And I remember Red saying, you need one of those beep, beep, beep. I said, oh, wait no. So that was kind of fun, but people were looking, we could see, I wonder if they noticed we're going backwards. So I was coming up on Mission Bay, got to do a midfield crossing over Lindbergh, main airport. And I said, we can't really see where we're going. Really, we can guess. We hope everybody sees you. But if we had an issue over Lindbergh, because it's a 1,000-foot crossing, if something went wrong and they found out we were going backwards, that would not look good. So I spun it around and went the proper way down to Brownfield. We landed. Oh, we had a good time at Happy Hour that night. It was fun. So anyway, I didn't plan on telling that story, so I'm off the.
Private GPS, it sounds like.
Say again?
You said you use Loran, so you use that GPS stays.
Did I use GPS? We didn't have GPS back then. And Loran was Loran C. And our airborne Loran C, although FAA approved, would only work. It worked okay on the shore or close to the coast. It didn't do any good in the middle part of the country, though.
So he did reckon based on freeways.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, our main map was behind the seats, was a Loran McNally. And, yeah, because the crew asked, well, where are you now? We'd go down to the next exit 16, and that's where we were. So we'd often on a long cross country, we'd come up on it. We'd look for a good truck stop. And we said, we got a good one up here at exit 16, and we'd circle the blimp. Of course, people are going, wow, what's that guy? Here's his blimp circle, and then a little while later, here comes the crew. They all have their blimp stuff on, and they're treated like royalty. Well,
How'd they get the goodies up to you?
we always had our brown bags, but crazy stories about that. When I was POG, pilot on the ground, because usually 3 of us, 2 in the blimp, 1 on the ground, keeping them all behaving right. And so you gotta wear your uniform and you go into this truck stop, captain's uniform. I can't tell you how many times they didn't charge you. Because you get to the cash register and they go, bus drivers eat for free. It's okay.
It's just an Airbus.
All right. Uh-oh,
Whoops.
uh-oh.
What did we do, Hunter?
Please please help.
Please help.
Yeah. So anyway, while she's fixing my mistake there. So that was the cross country. And this is the section of coast that we did backwards all the way to San Diego. So 2 records in one day, but no way to prove it. How'd you do? There.
I'm just going all the way out to
Okay.
back in because I'm not sure how that happened.
We'll try. Okay, now we're out on the coast of California. And we often travel between LA and San Francisco. And there's a wonderful little town exactly halfway through called Santa Maria. Anybody ever been out there? Yeah, beautiful country out there. And lots of good stories about navigating that airspace and
Yeah, they get a lot of winds there too.
yeah, Gaviota Pass and all this stuff. I got all.
Follow too.
Yeah, yeah. So we're on this cross country and we're, first night in Santa Maria, then the next day up to San Francisco. And an incredible, just like all the flying, incredibly beautiful way to see the country. So there's where Santa Maria is. And in the town of Santa Maria is a small airport built by the military during World War II for practice and relief. And if anybody's seen the movie Rocketeers, it was filmed on that field. It's a general aviation field. They have a little bit of service in there. But the best part is it's got a hopper. Back then it used to be Holiday Inn, right on the airport. I mean, outside the restaurant bar, happy hour, was the ramp with airplanes. And beyond that was our blimp. Here's a picture of the ship on the mast. And in the lower left, you can see the hotel. So here's my crew all dressed up, happy hour, checking out the girls. By the way, happy hour, it goes from 3 to 4 pilots and 20 crew to 20 pilots and 4 crew. And, they're not going to know the difference. And the tricks and the conversations that took place over the years. And they go, that's our blimp. Would you like to go out and see it? And, oh, man, all sorts of things happen. So this is us on the mast. And so this one morning, we're getting ready to leave. I sent the crew out, get the fuel up, pull the cables up, get the truck ready to go, make sure everything's good to go. And I was in the parking lot putting my luggage in my 5.0 Mustang. And the parking lot is, I don't have a pointer. So I'll go up here. This is the blimp. And this is the hotel. There's the ramp that they park airplanes on. This is our parking lot. So I'm in the parking lot putting my bags in the back of the hatchback. Here comes a string of chips. Guys sitting up real straight. California Highway Patrol on their motorcycles. 20 of them. Like a mother duck, a little ducklings, And they were coming down this street. Well, they had a practice area real close to where the blimp was. And they were heading out there to do some training. But they drove by and the lead guy just sat up so straight and proud. He looked at me in the parking lot in uniform, and he turned into the parking lot, and they all followed him, single file, and he pulls up. He goes, "You flying that thing?" I said, "Maybe." Then he says, "Any chance we can take a look at it?" I said, "Sure." I said, "I'm getting ready to go out there right now. Why don't you follow me through the gate? There's a security gate." So we went and we drove down to the security gate, and I had a pass. And I got out of the car and I went back to him. I said, "Here's the deal. Once all of you get in through the security gate and it closes like we're required to do, I'm going to use this hold tight for a few seconds. I'm going to take off in this Mustang and burn rubber And then you guys come after me with everything you got. And you go, okay. So we got through the gate, they stood there, and I just burned rubber all the way around. Just sideways, just screaming like crazy. My crew's out here getting the ship ready, and they start hearing all this racket. And I come up and I do an e-brake turn. I say, come on, we gotta get out of here. And here comes this 20 cops. They were so, you couldn't have planned it. You couldn't do it. You couldn't do it unless you had a plan. So after the dust settled, we took a picture. And the ship is ready to go. And then one guy with his hand up, he's one of my buddies, he's from Holland, one of the other pilots, and it was so much fun. Again, I'm only from Blimp. They had fun, we had fun. Anyway, so this picture has a great story behind it. I made a video, which I'll show you after this. Fitzy and I are heading up the Mississippi River, coming up from Texas, going up towards Memphis and St. Louis. And beautiful day. We just beyond the Red River, we joined the Mississippi. And we're in the old German blimp, low and nice speed, and going around the corners. It's a pretty squirrely river. And it was fascinating to see the channels. That's a complex river. I can't imagine being on one of these big tugboats and navigating. I don't know how to do it. I can barely get up the river in a blimp, but so we came around this one bend, and you'll see it in the video. It was like out of a Mark Twain movie. Here's this paddle wheel chugging against the current. And we're going, hey, that's what you expect to see on the Mississippi, So immediately I imagined, okay, it's going to be full of men with their long ties, and women in their gowns. So we come up alongside the blimp, and there was nobody to be seen. Some workers welding and painting and so forth. But we went right past pretty close, and you could hear the whistle, the steam coming out of the whistle. He was tooting his horn night and day, because here comes this blimp right past him. So as soon as I got by the boat, I looked to the left. I go, look at that. That's an empty sandbar. And Fitzy and I thought that. Fitzy and I never said a word. We just giggled like little kids. So I'm going to show you a video that I took as we come up on the boat. And the landing, listen to the sound. So you hear the engines, and you'll hear a pop, pop. That's part of the dampers for the ballonets. Then you'll hear the gear touch down. Then you'll hear us go into reverse. And we rolled along that sandbar for quite some time. But we first drug the nose lines. You can tell if the sand's hard or not, because it wouldn't be good to get stuck out in the middle of Mississippi in a blimp, And you only have one wheel. So we rolled along, and I'm filming the whole time. And then we took off and buzzed past them, and off we went. And then, 4 or 5 days later, we were up in St. Louis. And we did Memphis, and then one other stop, Cape Girardeau, and then St. Louis. I can't remember the sequence. But anyway, my parents had planned to fly out to St. Louis to visit for the weekend, just to see what was happening. And I planned to take them in town for dinner. And we were at East St. Louis Airport. And that's how I made the connection with these guys. I was flying that day before my parents got there, and I said, there's that boat that we buzzed. And so my parents got in, we got in the car, we headed into town. I said, before we go to the restaurant, I want to stop by the waterfront. Got to go see somebody. And then, if you've ever been out there, the levee, the waterfront's kind of slanted. If the water's low, you park there. If not, but got a little bit of an angle. So I parked my parents there for 20 minutes. They're sitting there. And I went up to the boat, and they were getting ready to have a big affair. And everybody was formal, the guy at the gangplank. It was their welcome to the summer season with the governor and the mayor. And I went up to the guy, and I said, is Captain on board? The crewman at the steps. He goes, who can I say is asking? I said, My name's Hunter. I was flying McDonald's Blimp a couple of weeks ago. He goes, that was you? I go, yeah. I said, hold on a minute. And he went up, got the captain, brought him down. And again, it looked like he walked right out of a Mark Twain novel. White suit, big fuzzy beard, long white hair, and mustache. Captain Don Summers. And we had a wonderful quick visit because he had to get busy. And we caught up again in a couple of days. And he brought me this picture of the 8x10. I didn't even have it. So that's taken from his steamboat coming up the Mississippi. And later on, in my many travels through New Orleans with airships, I called him and we got together many, many times in New Orleans with different crewmen, had fun. So there we are sitting on the middle of the Mississippi River in a blimp. And let's see if this will play the video. Fingers crossed.
Spring of 1986, Mike Fitzpatrick and I were flying the McDonald's Blimp up the Mississippi.
Is that a New Orleans?
We just happened upon this northbound riverboat. Then we saw an opportunity. There was this empty sandbar that was in need of an airship right next to the boat. So we thought we'd give it a try. Of course, we were very careful and we checked to make sure that the sand was good and hard before we actually touched down. Here's how it went. Listen to the background.
Great. I could keep on the ship won't believe this.
A few weeks later, I ran into the captain of the riverboat, Captain Don Summers. What a neat guy. He became a good friend for many years, and he took this picture.
It seemed like the riverboat was so close to the sandbar. Like, how could it be so deep for them?
That river is amazing.
Yeah.
Spring of 1980.
So, I put the dot there for the Mississippi River.
They holding it down?
All right. Now, again, how much time do I have?
You got about 15 minutes.
Okay,
30
good. Sorry for more stories. So this picture is of with originally the McDonald's blimp, later the MetLife blimp. But I wanted to show you this perspective because you can see a door handle on the side. That door was the exact door they used on Volkswagen minivans years ago. Remember how you lift it up and it'd go out and slide back on a rail? That was that mechanism. There's the right engine, and then those louvers are the inlet for the ballonnet air pressure. So the prop wash would feed the ballonnet pressure in flight. And then when the thrust wasn't much, we would turn big fans on to provide pressure. But those are the inlets during flight. That's the crew lifting it up for some reason, who knows what, but probably doing a weight check and all. 'Cause remember, these things are pretty light. And you can see the night sign wires and everything. So this picture I put in here, I couldn't believe I found it. On the way out to California that first year as a student pilot, when I noticed the turkeys going through the trees and so many other things. When I got out in the desert, I noticed these rabbits that were so big and had the ears were 3 feet high. I mean, and they were fast. I was amazed. I said, man, this would be a great place to shoot rabbits. So we get to California. I visit with a good friend of mine, and when I had friends in a certain town, they'd often want to go to dinner. I said, now, please, I'll buy a chicken, just cook a home cooked meal. Because I ate every meal out, every meal. I averaged over 200 nights a year in a hotel for over 10 years. I got enough soap to last me a while. So my buddy Bob picked me up at the airport and we got a chicken or something. His wife fixed dinner, but we stopped by the gun shop on the way home to pick up something or drop something off. And while he's dealing with the gunsmith, I'm looking in the cabinets and there was this 22 semi-automatic survival rifle, cheap. It would break down, you shove everything in the plastic stock and put the cap on it, it would float. And it was used and it was cheap. I said, man, that would be fun. It fit in my flight bag. And so Bob said, you want it? I said, yeah, but what about, the legal stuff? I'll just buy it, take it. So we bought it and I took it. And with a bunch of ammo, a couple extra clips. So weeks later, it's time to head back east, cross the desert, eventually Chicago and New York. And Jim, it was just two of us, Jim Dexter and I. So we fly an hour in the seat and then read a book in the back or take a nap, do whatever you want. And then switch out because it can, especially in that WDL, it's a lot of work, big wheel, and especially on the desert because you're working thermals. So after about the second cycle, we're out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, there's nothing out there but these big ears. And so I went in the back, got my flight bag and opened it up, put the gun together, put a clip in it, and slid up on the floor to that door. I put my feet out on the rail. I said, hey, Jim, find me a rabbit. And I looked back and he goes, so he was looking around, he found a rabbit. He kept it on the rail. And this rabbit was so good at it. He just scared them. They were laughing at us. And I put another clip in there. But we kept going, so he's safe. And now here's the next one. And we did that for a while. I said, save some shells for me. And I did. So we were laughing so hard. You had to be there. So it was time to switch out, and I got it all ready for him. And he sat on this edge here on the floor. I said, find your weapon. So I found a weapon. And he's shooting, and I felt better because he wasn't anywhere near close. But so that was, and then it froze up on him. And when it came my hour, I went back, and that action was so cheap, we just melted it. It was trash. We had fun. It was worth it. So we get back to Point B, get ready to go to happy hour. And the mechanics did the post-flight inspection. And one of the guys comes up and says, what did you guys hit? We're thinking, did we hit a rabbit? How did he know we had a gun? And we didn't hit anything. He goes, are you sure you didn't run into something? No. Why? He said, well, that right prop's all nicked up. I said, really? These are very expensive reversing props. He said, it's all nicked up. He said, I don't know if I can file it out or not. And we go, whoa. And we snuck off. A couple of days later, they had to do another ballonet wax in the back, in the rear ballonet. And they came in the happy hour late, filthy dirty. And Ken and what's his name came in, walked in there, and they reached in their pockets, came out with cigarette butts and 22 shells. And they said, did you get anything? Again, you had to be there.
How would those get sucked in?
Through those scoops right there.
Oh, no.
So they were ejecting off the gun,
Yeah.
right through the prop and right into the intakes and up into the ballonet.
Oh,
We never even thought about that. So we gotta put some bullet deflectors up there next time.
Yes, I think they should have built them with windows that could open.
So that's me in my office relaxing. That's when we were flying NYPD up in New York during the world's most secured airspace during the Republican convention. That's a whole other set of stories. I might make a program about that. So that's one more story I see here in my notes. So we're going through the highest elevation, going east to west or west to east. Because remember I said how the helium expands as you go up, and so you're limited to your altitude pressure rating. So that's a real critical thing, especially when you're flying an old bag. You don't know if it's going to split open or not, and you don't want to find out the hard way. So right about there is where we follow the railroad, the original railroad, at the lowest elevation through the mountains. It's, I wrote it down, it's 70, I think it's 4,700 feet, which is up there, yeah, 4,700 feet above sea level. So that heliums need a lot of room up there. And Fitzy's flying, and I'm staying, he said, Hunter, hold these cables tight. So there were 2 overhead cables on toggles that you could pull to release helium. And then to the left of them was the same thing to hold them shut. So he said, hang on to those things. So we're going through this pass. We're moving pretty good. Right over the railroad track. Nose lines are literally bouncing off the train tracks. And I'm hanging on these things to keep the helium from popping. And the pressure gauge, which is all in German, is getting up. It was always in the green. Every once in a while it touches the orange. It's into the red. And I'm going like, well, if we pop, we're not going to go far, because we're right above the surface. And I'll never forget Fitz. He's working this thing, and it's really rough. He said, that damn train comes around that corner, he's going to have to move. So, and there's many, many, many other airship stories that I can tell, but I thought these were some of the more funny ones. That's my presentation. Any questions?
How do you fly, you fly mainly on VFR,
Yes.
so that when the weather's bad and you don't have your visual contact, do you have instruments?
Yes. Yeah. The skyships, this one here, for example, are full IFR equipped. We have 4-color radar. We can map the terrain if we tilted it down. So if you're coming in like a coastal town in California, you get these coastal fog, you could actually tilt it down 15 degrees so you can see the shoreline and fly on the deck right on in the inlet if you wanted to. But we had all the navigational gear to go IFR. And I've done that several times, usually only to get out because we got to get down the road and the weather not too far away is fine. So let's just get out of this river valley or whatever's creating the challenge. But I never used it for an approach because we got in that situation. Yes.
So if the blimp deflates, do you have any cushion of time to how long you can take to land, or is the blimp
It doesn't.
sit?
It doesn't.
You go straight
deflate.
down?
It doesn't deflate. It never happens.
But if any one of those accidents or things that you mentioned in innies and outies get too big and
They don't.
it doesn't happen?
No. It would take, if there was a hole as big as that map at the equator, which is where the pressure is equal, it would take 3 or 4 hours for that airship to deflate. There's so much
No
volume.
matter what size?
No, I'm saying a hole that big.
Okay.
What if lightning hits you?
That's happened. Yep. It makes a zap and all your radios are flop. And it smells funny. So
Skip the land right away, or?
you never know. Depends where you are. Yes.
Your story about how you go across the country. My brother was a search and rescue guard stationed in Mobile at one time. And he was in the Arctic and Antarctic detailing it transverse to San Francisco to pick up Qatar. And they'd be flying over the desert. Now, you see, think about the search and rescue helicopters for the Arctic and Antarctic are painted orange with white stripes rather than white with orange stripes for obvious reasons. And you'd say we'd have our CB radio on. And we'd be following, we'd be following the interstates through Mexico, New Mexico, and you hear the CB radio. That's what's a Coast Guard doing out here in the desert.
Yeah, we thought about that, never did. Yes.
I think, Roger, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I've been enjoying your presentation by Zoom. Are there any restrictions on the type of message that can be placed on the exterior of the blimp, and does that apply equally to all the states you fly over?
We've never had the challenge because we were so proper to begin with. So, but here's an interesting challenge we had, unexpected, similar. So 1990, I think it was, I was hired to run the Miller Lite Texas Tour, Texas Tour Miller Lite or something like that. And we were expected to stay in Texas the whole summer with Miss Texas, part of the crew, which is the best part. And we were expected to attend as many state fairs in Texas as we could in the summer months. Now you got to remember, Texas has 200 and some counties, I think, or maybe more. And they have, half of those are dry. So the problem is our vehicles could not transit those counties on other than a federal highway, interstate. So, we have to go point A to point B, pretty straight line because of speed and stuff. Or our crew, depending on the layout of the highways, may or may not stay with us. That became a real problem in our planning. And so they wanted to know everything day by day, not even thinking about weather. And luckily for me, because I wasn't looking forward to the summer, except for her. But anyway, we were a day away from taking delivery of the brand new blimp and on the mast in Uvalde, Texas, on its way from where it was built on the West Coast to be delivered to us in Houston. It deflated. It delaminated. And no more. And I worked for Richard Branson at the time. And I got a great video of him flying with me over Phoenix. We spent about an hour together flying. Great guy. Then he hired me, and we're going to do this Virgin Lightship first tour, and then do stuff all over the world. And that was the first contract, and it didn't go over well with him at all. And of course, I was disappointed. I had to fire my crew, all ready to go, all brand new vehicles, take them back to the dealer. It was the end of it, just like that. But it was a delamination issue with the design of the airship. It was not one of these big ones. It was a little baby. So, yes, ma'am.
I guess we all know about the Hindenburg disaster. Could anything have been done to avert that?
Well,
Can you repeat that question?
she asked about the Hindenburg disaster and if there was anything that could have been done to prevent it from happening. I got there late, but I've been there to where it happened. I think it was later. And from what I know, there's a lot of debate about the origin of the spark. Now you got to keep in mind that the Hindenburg was inflated with hydrogen.
I was remembering.
Okay, big difference. Hydrogen is very unstable and of course very flammable. We use helium, very stable and inflammable. It'll put a fire out. So, and they're really interesting gases, by the way. Hydrogen, which what they have, is the world's smallest molecule. Helium, which we use, is also very small. And to get back to your answer, the only thing that would have worked realistically was if the Americans had agreed to provide them with helium, but they would not because of the interest or the concern about upcoming war. They were not in it because we had the only source of helium back then the West Texas wells, only place in the world you can get helium. And a lot of countries wanted our helium. And that's before we learned how to really use it. We use it so much now for so many things. A lot of high-tech medical things happen with helium. A lot of manufacturing, a lot of things happen with helium. And give you an example of how small that molecule is. You know, it's hard to tell this to younger generations, but a Coke bottle. If you took a Coke bottle, filled it with helium, put the cap on it, real snug, then put it in the windowsill and let the sun shine on the bottle, the helium within will warm up quicker than the outside air. That helium will actually exit the bottle through the glass. That's how small that molecule is. So when you have an airship, big bag of gas like that, worth a lot of money nowadays, you have to build the airship to accommodate so many things, four main things. Number one, the weight. It's got to be lifted. So that fabric needs to be lightweight as possible. Number two, it has to be structurally sound. Most of the loads are in tension. So it has to be able to withhold a pretty good tension load on it. Number three, it has to be UV resistant. So your plastic yard chairs rot. You can't let that thing rot in the sun. It's got to be UV protected, whether it be the fabric, the way the fabric's made, or the final coat that's on top of the fabric, which is usually the most protection you can get. That's why most of them are white. And the most important and most challenging factor with that helium bag is permeability. So you've got the helium in the bag. Remember I told you how low a pressure it is? Just say an inch of water pressure, 1/27th of a PSI. You still are going to get permeation through that fabric. So there's different ways we did that as time went on. Fabric used to be sewn together at a seam. But every time you put a needle through, you make a hole. Then nowadays, most of them are what we call butt seams. So the fabric comes together, and then a strap, another layer gets glued with heat on top of it that accepts the shear load. And but all that's weight. This is much lighter, stitching it, but it makes holes. This takes a lot more material, which is weight. So you got all sorts of considerations of how you're going to build that bag to hold that helium so you stay in air. It's been fun in my flight testing experience with the engineers and the technology has been really changing and seeing issues pop up and go, well, that didn't work, and try solutions. It's really been fascinating.
Isn't the paint mill adding a lot of weight as
Yes,
well?
the paint does. And not just the paint. I told you earlier about weight considerations, which means rain. So I had, that blimp there was great when it was new. And because the fabric is pretty well white and it has a light coat of gloss over it, white painted gloss, very expensive finish. And it did really well, both in weight considerations and repelling water. Until you spent at least one summer up in New York at Linden or near those refineries, and then it would get dirty. And then when the bag is dirty, it retains more water, rain, than it does when it's soaked. And it's like a car. So now, instead of having calculating on an early morning with a heavy dew, it's going to be 100 kilos of extra weight. It's now 27. So you go out and fly for 20, 30 minutes. That's when I would take the local airport folks that did so nice. See you, Paul.
Yeah, sorry.
And, so I had to do a dew drop run because my ballast for the day's flight, whether it be a cross country or a sporting event, was based on my takeoff flight. And so I'd say, I got to do a 20, 30 minute flight. Anybody want to go flying? And of course, everybody, yeah, get in. And we go fly around and blow the dew off. Come back and we're 100 to 150 kilos lighter. Now I can reballast for the mission. And so my goal on a mission was, when I come into land, I want to be 50 kilos heavy. It's the most controllable weight. We never fly these things light because they're really tough to control. So we always fly heavy. So if I have a cross country and I got to do 300 miles, I got a 10 knot headwind. It's going to take the crew along, 8 hours to get there and get set up. I got to calculate my power, high, low, medium, the fuel burn at that power, gallons per hour. I got to calculate what, if any, superheat, which is the difference between the helium temperature and the outside air temperature. Sometimes it's positive in the morning, the sun's been hitting it. And then if I land at night, it's going to be negative because the sun's down. So I got to calculate that change, which are big numbers. And then there's a lot of other things, or am I going to encounter rain? That's weight, things like that. So that when I get to point B, I want to land and do a nice one at 50 kilos heavy. And sometimes the crew would, if the conditions were okay and everybody's in a big rush, they would take me. I'd land to the crew before we got on the mast. And everybody'd stop, lift it up, do a whale. So they lift it up, and a trained eye could watch it settle. And you could tell in a few kilos how heavy it was or light. And so they would judge pilots by. Yes.
I hate to cut you off because I could listen to you for another 90 minutes tell stories, but our Zoom's gonna turn off soon.
Okay.
So we need to end and
It's
you need
been a
to do
pleasure.
another one of these.